Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be chatting about how Canada is a nation run by criminals for criminals, Canadian public school teachers being told to queer outdoor learning, and the gender predation paradigm. All right, let's get started. So first off, we've got Canada is a nation run by criminals for criminals. There comes a point where government waste stops looking like incompetence and starts looking like treason. Canada has long passed that point. What we are witnessing now is not mere mismanagement or bureaucratic drift. It is the systemic looting of a nation by the people meant to serve it. Billions vanish with no oversight, no accountability, and no shame. The numbers have grown so grotesque that one struggles not to call this what it is: organized theft. The state tells us its creed is responsible governance, yet almost every act defies that claim. What we have instead is a system run by well-dressed operators who treat the public purse as their own. So, seeing all of this, Canada is now a nation run by criminals for criminals. What scandals illuminate this uncomfortable truth?
What era do we want to look at? If we just kind of look over the last 5-10 years, I mean, the big ones under Trudeau would have been the We Charity scandal. Where they were funneling money to, his wife and other people were getting paid to do these performances and these shows. They were getting paid exorbitant amounts of money that made no sense for market rates. And then there was just a lot of favoritism going back and forth there. You had the SNC-Lavalin scandal, which was contracts. What's their name now? I forget. SNC-Lavalin. They changed their name. So anyway, they were getting billions of dollars worth of contracts, and there was obviously kickbacks going back and forth. And Trudeau tried to get the Raybould to sort of squash it and not really give them any trouble. That whole scandal was a bit of a mess. And then SNC-Lavalin was, I think they were barred from contracts, but they ultimately changed their name and now they get billions more in contracts, of course. One of them that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to is the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So this we built this Canadian Infrastructure Bank to scale federal infrastructure projects, which are usually done at the provincial level. Basically, we lit $50 billion on fire and did nothing at all. The Green Slush Fund, that's a little more recent. That's what shut down government essentially last October. October 2024, which left us closed for almost 8 months, I think you'd said, right? That was at least $300 million that we know was, I don't know, just disappeared into corruption. And then I think you can touch on the Liberal COVID procurement, which was absolute robbery. We're signing on for all these vaccines. We're paying billions and billions of dollars. We're printing billions and billions of dollars. And we're just giving it away to pharma companies. And we're not even using these vaccines. The list goes on. I mean, right now, what I would even talk about is how we're currently selling our natural resources off. I know it's a little different, but it's going to shake out the same way, how we're allowing these other countries right now, the UAE, but we're looking at China, Germany, India, and we're not just bringing in their capital to help boost our GDP. We're bringing in their capital so they can own and influence our natural resources and major assets. So, I mean, I'm sure you've got more.
Yeah, let's pile on to that. So you've got the recent one, which was Stellantis, where Ottawa handed them a $15 billion contract, their subsidy, the largest in Canadian history. And Melanie Joly, the industry minister, didn't even read the contract before approving it.
In fairness, I'm not sure she can read, so let's give her a little leeway here.
And then this was also around the same time that Stellantis shifted their Jeep productions down to the US. Then you've also got the Stellantis execs refusing to go in front of a parliamentary hearing, which if you're receiving that much in Canadian taxpayer dollars, I don't think you have an option. Like, how is that not criminal at that point? Then you've also got Honda receiving major subsidies without full Treasury Board review, Volkswagen hiding its cost estimates while they were getting subsidies. Then you've got Northvolt being showered with subsidies and then going bankrupt afterwards. Also, on top of that, you've got this more recent one as well with the LNG firm. Carney was running headlines about this a couple weeks ago. Oh, this massive new project, right? We're greenlighting LNG and natural gas out in BC. First of all, it was a project that was already in the works, but the major partner in that is an American firm, and then the actual vessel itself, the LNG machinery that they're going to be using is going to be made in Korea and Japan and then floated over to BC. So you've got Canadian taxpayers subsidizing a project that is creating jobs in Korea or Japan, and then American firms are the main profiters off of this. So it's like, where's the Canadian taxpayer return here?
Probably using Chinese ships to ship. Yeah. Like, what are we doing, guys?
The other one too was Telestat. Now that was a loan. It was a $2.14 billion loan,
but with no
strings attached.
Yeah. It's like, you don't actually have to do anything.
Yeah. They were in the contract. There was no, so the whole thing was, okay, you're going to create a satellite internet infrastructure to provide rural Canadians with access to the internet, but there was no obligation to connect a single home in the contract, no penalties for failure, no clawbacks if the project collapses, and no enforced timelines. It's now 3 years since that deal was made.
Oh wow, it's been 3 years since that happened?
Yeah, dude, we're in a time warp.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
And then at the same time too, while they were handing that to Telestat, they were completely overlooking Musk in Starlink, despite already having the infrastructure, many Canadians already using it, and it being ready to go. Musk said he could have done it for half the cost.
They did it because they don't like him.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is so much worse. It's like, well, we're emotional about this guy, so fuck that, Canada. What?
Right. And two, you look at it and, okay, so they say one of the other, obviously it was more ideological and they just didn't want to give Musk any more business. But even to, okay, if that's your argument, then you can't use the whole BC LNG thing where you've got an American firm partnered with them.
Of course. Well, those are the good Americans that we like.
Yeah.
Maybe they voted Democrat. That's what they're saying. A hooky doke.
Also, fun fact, actually, one of the guys that is involved in that project was a major Epstein link, and Epstein funded his entire projects, which is, just a fun little side note there. Nice. Then you've got ArriveCan, the $54 million app that should have cost $80,000, and most of that money went into a firm with just a few people, and that admitted they didn't actually even do any work on the app. And then actually,
a firm that received hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, for several projects while Trudeau was in office.
I remember that there was that one article that, like, the piece on GC strategies. It wasn't like an investigative piece, but it was I can't remember what media outlet did it, but it was like, this little firm is one of the quickest growing businesses.
Yeah, it's like they're winning awards for one of the fastest growing companies in the country while just siphoning government dollars in and doing nothing for us. Wonderful. A+.
And then and actually the most recent example that just came out over the last few days is the Algoma Steel scandal, where I think it was they received, what was it, $500 million? Yeah, $500 million. And then now they're laying off 1,000 steel workers.
Right. I think ultimately the reality here is, like, there's a lot of scandals that are in front of us, that we see that are in front of the curtain, I should say. There are significantly more behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you and I talk about this. I mean, you had, I forget whose theory it was, or maybe it wasn't just a theory, it was just a calculation, that 40% of every dollar that goes to government just goes to bureaucratic waste.
Joe Carson, Diagnosis Red Tape. He was he used to work for the Saskatchewan government.
Right, so 40% of all dollars that go to the government go to waste anyway. And I'm of the mind that another 30 to 40% go to corruption, go to buying votes. So ultimately, like, and I understand that I've sort of made a bit of a leap on the additional 40%, but I think you can make the argument pretty strong there, where it's like, hey, look, 70 to 80% of every dollar spent in the government is pretty much lit on fire. And I think it's good to sort of see it through that lens, because the only way we sort of correct course here is if we start demanding some accountability and using this filter or these baseline projections that we have to forecast, because they're not giving us the information, as kind of our proxy to be like, okay, if you're going to correct course, here's where we think things are at. You need to improve from this point. Here's what our expectations are. And I mean, I'm not super optimistic that we get there, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah. And, I hear when we talk about this kind of stuff, a lot of people will say how there's a revolt needed, or a revolution, or whatever, that you need to overthrow them, that you can't vote your way out of this. But now, I think there's a flaw in that, and that's why I don't ever call for it. First of all, because I think if you don't know what a revolution actually looks like, I highly suggest you go watch them. I know you like to think that it's probably just, it's going to be directed towards the people I don't like, but it's really just everybody and anybody. Like if you look at the French Revolution, it was just random people ending up on that guillotine. But anyways, Václav Havel pointed this out in regards to totalitarian systems, because I do believe we are living in one, which the difference between a dictatorship and a totalitarian society is that in dictatorships, people know they're being ruled. The rulers do it much more through force. It's open military. It's, if you oppose our rule, then you're going to go face against the wall. And everybody knows this reality. The difference with a totalitarian system is they don't have to actually use open force, because it's a lie has permeated society to such a deep degree that people aren't even aware of what's going on. And so it's kind of like the Matrix in the sense where if you try to attack the system, like in that famous first scene where Morpheus is walking Neo through it, he says like these people don't understand they're part of a system and they will actually fight you, even though you're the one trying to save them if you oppose it. And it's true. So even if you were to say, try to rise up against the government in this scenario, then all you're doing is actually giving them more justification to crack down. And everyone in society outside of that will look at that and go, yeah, I think these new measures, these new crackdown measures and limits on our freedom are a good thing because we don't want that violence.
Yes.
And so that leaves you with one option, and this was Václav Havel's point, was that your only option in a totalitarian society is to expose the lie, because any other means will actually just end up hurting your own cause.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with that. I think that's very well thought out. The challenge that we have here, and I know you see things very much the same way, is that they're taking away our opportunity to actually expose the lies. So we have these conversations, and it'd be nice if we were at a larger scale, but it is what it is. But we're suppressed. You and I go through these ebbs and flows through multiple, pretty much all the social media channels where we're doing well and we're not doing well. And the content's relatively similar. It's just a matter of how we're being positioned in the algorithm. That's definitely part of it. You've also got a number of bills, a lot of liberal policy. And the thing is they know what you're saying. There's a whole group of people that sit there and they just basically think of how they can maintain power and profit over the people. That's what they do. So they know the policy they need to implement. And it is stuff like, the Streaming Act, the News Act, Bill C8, Bill C9, which are the internet killer bill. They can literally cut off your internet without any oversight. And the other one where they're redefining hate speech in public spaces and signs and stuff like that. And Bill C36, if that comes to fruition, is the online harms bill. And when you put this apparatus together, it really suppresses our opportunity to have these conversations at scale. So it can feel a little helpless sometimes. I agree. The reality of revolution is not the solution. I guess what I'm saying is we are also, though, sort of losing the opportunity to expose the lies. I think maybe the only way to do this at this point is if more people start speaking out. I think rather than just, hey, Jonathan and Liam, or people similar to us, I don't mean to just put it on us, can sort of continue to push this message of exposing the lies. But you need to multiply. You need not just the two of us, you need 2,000 of us. Then you need there to be 20,000 of us. And I think at that point, you may have a chance. Yeah. I think that's what it's going to take.
And actually, that was exactly Havel's point as well, is that like totalitarian systems don't collapse from force, but with a withdrawal of consent. And that if everybody stops pretending and enforcing the lie on one another, because it's also not just that the lie is coming from top down, it's that citizens lie to one another all of the time.
Of course.
So really, the best thing that any individual can do in that society is just I think it was actually Solzhenitsyn said that all you can do in a totalitarian society is say, I will not let these lies flow through me.
Yeah.
And it's like you have to become a stop force for that.
Yeah, it's just the truth has to be your North Star. It's tough, but I think that's what it takes.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got Canadian public school teachers told to queer outdoor learning. It's getting harder to believe that this is real. In British Columbia, the teachers union is urging 50,000 teachers to queer outdoor education, turning nature walks into lessons on gender fluidity, drag, and, quote, debunking heterosexuality in nature. Their own magazine promotes activities where kindergartners pull ivy as a metaphor for oppression, stare at clouds to question their gender identity, and use tree shapes to challenge whether male, female, or even right, wrong should exist. There's no lower age limit. This ignores the obvious. BC's ecosystem depends on male-female biology, yet teachers are told that even explaining reproduction reinforces, quote, colonial discourses. Why is this happening? Because Alberta pushed back on SOGI policies, these gender policies, and BC now feels compelled to double down, injecting gender ideology and anti-colonial narratives into every subject, even nature class. This isn't education, it's ideological experimentation on children, and it's destabilizing the foundations kids need to grow up in Canada. So what role should parents play when schools introduce ideology into every subject?
They should be playing the key role in all of this. This is insane.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what schools should be for. Schools should be for STEM learning, creative learning, not ideology. This is bananas. What's more annoying to me on this whole thing is they're not doing it because they think it's the right thing to do. They're literally doubling. It's in there. They're doubling down because another government is saying, hey, we should stop this. So they're like, no. We need to expand even further. So I go, wait a minute. If you actually think this is what's right for children, explaining this stuff to them at this age, which is fucking bananas, slap the shit out of that teacher, is what it is. If you think that that's right and you've set a system, well, here's our system because this is what we know is right. And then you see your next door neighbor going, well, that's insane. I'm not going to teach my kids any of that. I'm actually going to go the opposite direction. So now all of a sudden that system that you implemented, you said, well, this is right. This is what we need to do. Now you double down and you increase this and go for even younger children. Well, then that tells me that you're only doing this to harm them. You're only doing this for ideological reasons. You're not doing this because it's effective, or else that lower double down foundation you're now building, that's what you would have used to begin with if this was the right thing to do. So clearly, this has nothing to do with what is right for children. It has to do with leveraging nonsense ideology and politics, using kids, the original and should still be the protected class, as fodder. It's insane.
Yeah, and I think too, this is where it comes on to parents to really understand and take the time to learn what these ideologies are actually about in a way that you can put these teachers and administrators on the back foot and essentially remove their moral high ground that they think they have. They don't actually have it. But so for instance, this is what queer theory argues, is that, everything's about oppressor versus oppressed, right? Whether it's white versus black, whether it's women versus men, whether it's straight versus gay, whether it's colonial versus colonized, whatever. All of these things. They just see the world through this lens. And what they suppose with queer theory is that the very concept of normal is oppressive because anybody that doesn't fit that category then becomes quote unquote marginalized, right? And so what they or put forward as the solution to that problem is, well, we just need to give kids identity crises because they've been brought up in this world to believe that there's a normal way to be. And so we need to essentially break their psyche in order to break them out of this oppressive structure of normal.
Yes.
And then you can be whatever the hell you want to be. And this is what they call liberation. And so it is extremely dark because they are trying to break your child's mind. And you know what? Even to steel man their side, I can actually see, because I've gone through 2 identity crises in my life. They're not fun. Where you just completely lose your sense of self. You have no idea who you are, what you should do, what your path forward is. You lose all solid ground. One of those was actually in COVID because I'd spent 10 years trying to go down a specific path with music and the hospitality world. And I just got my dream job as the live music director at a venue in Toronto. The band stuff was going well. And then COVID just completely ended that. And as soon as I saw a couple months in that oh, this isn't going anywhere. Things are changing. Then you go, oh, I have no idea who I am anymore. It's the same thing athletes experience after retiring. It's like, oh, who am I? What do I do now? Now there is actually some positive in that, in the sense where then you get to decide, all right, who do I want to be now?
You get a blank slate to work from.
Right. And so that's what they see themselves giving to these kids is, well, we're liberating you from all of these identities that have been thrust upon you, but it's not fun. It's not fun to lose your sense of self.
Well,
and I think the vast majority of people won't get out of that. They'll just end up in this limbo spot where
you're sort of confusing them about like fundamental truths that we have about biology, and you're stripping away shared truths. So to your point, you're actually forcing these kids to build a false foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to go through the process of trying to break that once they realize that it's not reality, if they ever get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, for parents that want to push back on this stuff, there's an excellent book by a guy named Logan Lansing. It was co-authored by James Lindsay as well, but called Queering of the American Child. And it talks all about these theories and goes through what the academics and the architects were trying to put forward with this ideology. Some of them being Judith Butler, Jose Esteban Munoz, David Halperin. And so I highly suggest picking up that book and then go to the teachers and go, hey, this is what you're doing. I think some teachers know what they're doing. I think the vast majority of teachers are what Marxists would call useful idiots. These architects, these academic types that look at them and go, yeah, these are just people that don't fully understand the ideas they're teaching. But expose them to this and then, actually put them on the back foot and say, I know what you're up to here. Or if you don't know what you're up to, that's even a bigger problem.
What I would just sort of say to wrap this part up is we need to correct course here, because this manufactured confusion we're putting kids into is not only going to potentially ruin their lives. Think about what it does to a nation.
Mm-hmm.
Think of what this does. If this is the prevailing narrative for children, they are eventually going to run this country, and they are going to teach generations after them. If you do not correct course on this at some point, the fallout is far more significant when these thought processes rule society.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what Canada looks like, but I know it's not good. Oh yeah, the Tallow Truth. I've been using their products for at least 2 years now. I got hooked on their flagship skin cream F-Bomb. Then I found out they had a sunscreen substitute, and it's awesome. I even use it on my kids. And then in one of my orders, they included this lip chap. And I don't know about you, but I'm a lip chap essentialist. I know that's not a real thing. But anyway, I'm now addicted to their mint tallow lip chap. Then they came out with this product called the Freedom Face Whip. Dude, it's literally the nicest thing I've ever put on my skin. And now they have a soap. So yeah, the Tallow Truth is what's up. I literally put that on everything.
All right, moving on to our last story, we've got the gender predation paradigm. Here's the uncomfortable truth we need to face. Female promiscuity and adult content creation are the female counterparts to male criminality. Both are warped versions of the masculine ideal of strength and the feminine ideal of beauty. This is the core of what we'll call the gender predation paradigm, how male and female failure modes mirror each other when cultural guardrails collapse. These modes aren't identical to one another in practice, but they serve the same function: exploit one's biological advantage to prey on the weak and pull resources from them. And the consequences are the same: societal decay. When men's pathology goes unchecked, communities collapse into violence. When women's pathology goes unchecked, relationships collapse into mistrust, loneliness, and demographic decline. Men evolved strength for protection and provision. Women evolved beauty and fertility cues for pair bonding and long-term stability. These weren't arbitrary, but rather survival tools. Without family structure, stigma, or strong community norms, these traits turn predatory. Men's pathology is obvious: aggression, risk-taking, exploitation through force. Women's pathology mirrors it through a different channel: leveraging sexuality for attention, money, and short-term resource extraction. Both emerge from the same root: fatherlessness, weak communities, and the erosion of shared ideals. When duty disappears, instincts fill the vacuum and society pays the price. So, can masculine and feminine ideals be restored, or have we crossed a point of no return?
Well, I definitely think they can be restored. I'll tell you why. It's because I think that's our default mode. We are wired a certain way. We are wired over more than 1,000,000 years of how there is a significant difference between men and women and masculine and feminine. And it's a sliding scale. Some men are less masculine, others are more. Same with females. Some are more feminine, some are less. And you see a bit of a crossover, and that's perfectly fine. But there's an exception and a rule, right? And the rule generally is you do fill these different roles in society, and you do have this way of being programmed because it's in your DNA, right? So right now we're going through this gauntlet of society and media telling us that they're all the same, and that there's all this crossover. And like you said, there's a lot of these things happening where you're seeing predatory action from both sides in different ways. It's a very interesting point. But I do believe it can be restored. I just think we have to get to the region beta paradox point of this, which, if people aren't familiar, we talk about it frequently enough, is where when something's bad, you won't really do anything about it. You'll just sort of struggle and get by. But when it's bad enough, you'll make the change. And the reason I believe this to be the case is because a good portion of society, I would say 10 to 15%, already feel that it's bad enough and have gone back the other way, like hard line back the other way. They are homesteading, farms, teaching their kids to be more resourceful, more resilient, more capable, outside of what current society is sort of giving these kids. They're taking their kids out of the education system and doing a lot more private schooling or homeschooling. And you're actually seeing sort of this parallel education economy grow, where there's like groups of kids now from the community where they're all getting together and kind of doing like a private homeschool with one teacher. That's just part of it. But ultimately, you are seeing a good portion of society. And don't get me wrong, these are still the ones that were strong and would have wanted a more masculine, feminine world anyway. But they are sort of putting their foot down, and they are doing more than just providing for themselves in this way. They are creating the schools. They are helping other people learn the homestead process. There are communities now that are popping up where there's multiple families living together. And I'm not necessarily saying that is like the ultimate solution. All I'm saying is that's the sign that it is actually going back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's a very challenging uphill battle because you're constantly being inundated through the media, through social media, through policy, through politics, through the Liberal Party, through Democrats. I'm sure some Republicans are doing it too. That there's no difference, and that this crossover doesn't exist, and that they're trying to wash these things away. But again, I just think sort of like this prehistoric, how we're built DNA will work its way through this problem.
Yeah. I think actually our default mode is that more negative aspect. Like if you go look at kind of more, less civilized cultures, then you kind of see these things actually on a larger scale than ours. And I think it's much more our cultural evolution that kind of puts these guardrails on us. And that's largely what we've been seeing with this erosion of culture, which has been definitely a planned event, for the last 10 to 15 years aggressively. I know it goes back decades further than that, but this, post-national idea of no independent cultures from one another, that we'll just have this one big global one. But through that erosion, we've been reverting back to these more nefarious styles of how gender plays out. But I do agree with you that I am hopeful in the sense where I see more and more people going the opposite route, in the sense where I think there was even a study that came out recently over the last week or two, or not a study, but a poll about how alcohol intake among the youth generation is the lowest in like 50 years or something like
wild.
that.
I give you some stats on that. I may mess up the numbers slightly, but they were doing a breakdown. It might have been America, it might have been global. I think it was anyway. The figures were broken down by generation. So there was like the boomer generation were consuming like $32 billion of alcohol annually. The Gen X were like $28 billion annually. The millennials were like $34 billion. It was pretty crazy. Gen Z was 3. They were
Wow.
10% of the market. They were only 10% of the generational comparison in the market. It was wild.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Only 54% of people across the board reporting consumption of alcohol, the lowest level since Gallup began tracking the trend in 1939.
Yeah, it's wild.
So it's the lowest it's ever been since being tracked. Yeah, that's crazy. But you think about what's downstream from alcohol, right? It lowers your inhibitions and then you make poor decisions.
Oh, alcohol is the real gateway drug, people.
Yeah,
it's not.
it really is.
It's not like smoke some marijuana. You're going to do some crazy shit. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're going to sit on the couch and watch a Disney movie and eat a bag of chips.
Yeah. I know a bunch of people that, or not necessarily anymore, but I've definitely been around a bunch of people before that it's like, they have 2 beers and they're like, let's get into the nose beers next. And you're just like,
you guys ready to party? Like, whoa.
Yeah.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah, but I've never seen somebody smoke a joint and then just been like, hey, we should try heroin now.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I see this trend, and actually there was another one that came out recently about how the nightclub industry is starting to struggle because more and more young people are focusing on their health. And so I do see definitely positive trends in the other direction, but I also think it's very important that we understand these roles and these duties and what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, and try to actually live up to them. And I've made this point before as well, as I think what we've been living through, and actually because there was that recent, his name was Humberto Carollo of White Ribbon, right? He testified in Parliament recently that we need to censor male fitness influencers because they are leading men into misogyny and hateful tropes and blah, blah, blah.
That dude's such an asshat.
Yeah.
What are you talking about, bro?
I ripped him pretty hard, but it's true. It's because you go look at him. He is probably about 100 pounds overweight. There's nothing impressive about him. Even when he's talking about these things, he's not speaking with any conviction. He doesn't believe it. And this is exactly what I think Nietzsche was pointing out when it comes to what he would call slave morality, which is weak people that don't feel like they can create their own circumstances will try to tear down the ideals of the higher and more stronger people. And so that's exactly what you're seeing here is that, okay, well, I can't live up to this masculine ideal.
Yes.
So therefore my only goal, well, he could actually, it's completely in his control to start changing his behavior, but his only option then, if he takes that power away from himself of change, is to then remove the ideal and say nobody should live up to that. It's a stupid, oppressive, dark ideal that we need to get rid of and censor and blah, 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 because then he essentially pulls the people off of the ladder above him.
Yeah, it feels a little like communism for gender. It's kind of like finding the lowest common denominator in the bottom half and being like, everybody's got to stay down here. It's interesting though, you talk about like trying to implement these kind of ideals with kids. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm at now with having Jackson and, going to have more kids. So our thought process is like the day you become a man, essentially, is when you give back more to society than you take. Until then, you're a boy. But your goal is to get there. Your goal is to get there in a very productive way and do more for the world than you are taking from it. And that's kind of the way we see it. Like that's kind of the macro concept we are now trying to teach our boy. You know what I mean? And it is different for girls. It absolutely is. But this is the way we see things. So, and it's interesting because, Megan, my wife, she is a old school feminist. Actually believes in equality for men and women and that they should have equal opportunities and that they should be treated equally. But this is like early 2000s, not what the word means today. And it's been interesting because she's been repelled by what it's become and what it represents now and how it's tearing down masculinity and what that's doing to men and to boys. And so it's been interesting to watch her go through this transformation. I've kind of always been on this page with my boys and how I was raised and how I wanted to raise them. But it's like, she's now like leading the charge. She's like a step ahead of me. Be like, no. We need to instill these values in our boys. This is how the world works. And we need to bring this back to the world because it's falling apart. But yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's where it starts. And it gives me the confidence that we can restore these things. But again, it just takes collective action like we talked about earlier.
Yeah. I also think individual action leads to that collective action.
Correct.
In the sense where people learn, monkey see, monkey do. Yes. It's not that it's great that we sit down here and a lot of the times I am very grateful for it, just for being able to explore these ideas and think on the go and kind of shape my worldview as we go through this. But I think, and I learned this a long time ago, that I don't think that what we're doing in terms, or podcasts in general, actually, you know what? No. Yeah, as I say, think on the go, I'm definitely going to change my view. They can change, because whether it be David Goggins, Jordan Peterson, all of these types that I listen to very much, they did change the way that I behave and go forward in the world. But I think the best way is just to be a symbol of that, in the sense where, you know, okay, for instance, Jackson, not to say that I'm having any role at whatsoever in your child's life, but just even like the 2 times I've gone upstairs recently, he's now like started like squatting, and we'll do squats together. Yeah. Right. And it's just like, you know, I can't sit there and say, hey, Jackson, because he's incapable of understanding this at this point. Jackson, you know, if you squat, your legs will get stronger, and then you'll feel better and things will be good. It's just like, he just sees me doing the thing, and then just goes, I want to join.
Let's go.
And it's like, we like to think that adults are much more logic and kind of evolved in that sense, but it's really not. Like, I was having a conversation with a family member recently about somebody that we both know, where when I was around them and working out a lot, they were extremely healthy, and they were doing the same thing and talking about, oh, well, I need to buy a new wardrobe because all my clothes don't fit anymore. And then I moved out of that town, and all of a sudden just reverted back to normal.
Yeah.
And you go, I didn't ever make a comment to that person once about, hey, you need to get your shit together, or you need to do this or that. It was just like, oh, he's doing it, I should do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's individual action leads to collective action. I think that's ultimately what it is. You decide you're going to make that change, what we're going to do for our boy. He's going to instill those values in others, and it's going to continue to spread. Like, he's not going to go to some, like, if he hangs out with kids when he's older, whatever, if this ideology permeates, he will squash that. He will be a stronger character, and he will do his best to make sure those things move forward as well, as will we. So yeah, I totally agree. It's that individual action that leads to collective.
I think the best way to wrap up that topic is actually a quote by Marcus Aurelius, which I really love, where he said, stop arguing about what a good man is, just be one.
Yeah, perfect.
And, yeah.
He was such a G.
Yeah.
Damn.
All right, anything else you wanted to add today?
That's everything.
All right, before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to our Substack, where you can sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 5 days a week. That's blendrnews.com, BLENDR news.com. We thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.